Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to analyze the men's semifinals at the 2024 French Open. Let's start with Sinner against Alcaraz. First set, Sinner starts blasting the ball. And when Sinner plays like this, you think, how can anybody beat this guy? The pace of shot is just insane. Alcaraz, interestingly, in that first set was blasting with Sinner, and it didn't work out well for Carlos because he was committing a lot of mistakes. In the press conference after the match, Carlos said something really interesting. They asked him whether he sees himself as a clay court specialist, and Carlos said that he always wanted to be a player that can play well on all surfaces, but the surface that suits his game the best is hard court. And while I do think that Carlos is an amazing hard court player, the repertoire that he has makes him an exceptional clay court player, one that can collect multiple French Open titles. But the thing is, he has to play like a clay court player to do that, and not so much like a hard court player. And I would make the argument that even on hard court, Carlos can benefit from playing more like a clay courter at times. And I'm taking the Indian Wells tournament this year as an example where Sinner came in hot, undefeated, winning the Davis Cup, the Australian Open, Rotterdam. He was the favorite on paper in his semifinal match against Alcaraz, and he blew Carlos off the court in the first set in Indian Wells. It was very similar to the match today. But in the second set, Carlos switched up his tactic and started mixing up his shots, more specifically putting more height on some balls and then straightening out some others, opening up the court, utilizing drop shots, which is something that he always does, as well as transitioning to the net. And Carlos not only won that match against Sinner, but he won the whole tournament, beating Medvedev in the final. So in today's semifinal match, Alcaraz was showing very little of that. Like I said, he was blasting with Sinner and committing a lot of mistakes, and Sinner went up 6-2, broke Carlos early in the second set and was up 2-love. And at that particular moment, I received a text from a friend of mine who was wondering whether Sinner was going to win the Golden Slam. And you gotta put yourself now at that moment in time. Now this seems an impossibility, but when Sinner was dominating Carlos up a set in the break, it was quite plausible to think that Sinner could end up beating Carlos, winning the final, then go on to Wimbledon, win that. If he had won the French Open, he can also win the Olympics on clay, and why wouldn't Yannick be able to win the US Open? So this was my mind state early in that second set. I thought Carlos was toast if he was gonna continue playing like that, but he didn't. In that second set, he did start changing up his tactics a little bit. And I often talk about the camera angles when professional tennis matches are broadcasted, and I was complaining about not being able to see the ball in Monte Carlo and Madrid. I will say that in Roland Garros, the viewing experience has been excellent. Even on a sunny day like today, I saw the ball perfectly. But not only that, they were also showing a camera angle that was more eye level. And during a couple of those eye level clips, there was a backhand exchange, and I saw something very positive from Alcaraz. The fact that he was putting up a high ball and then straightening out one right after that. So he was mixing up the height of his shots. And all of a sudden, as poorly as Carlos played in that first set, Sinner started playing poorly in that second set. Carlos wins the second set 6-3, and then early in the third, Carlos continues to play better, and Yannick is still struggling, not only with his game, but also physically. He starts moving his fingers like this, and it looked like his hand was cramping. So at that moment in time, early in that third set, when I saw Sinner shaking out his hand, I thought this match is over. There's no way he's going to be able to last. He's already suffering from cramps. But guess what? In the on-court interview, we found out that Carlos Alcaraz was also cramping in that third set, and this explains why Alcaraz played maybe one of the worst sets tactically speaking. It made absolutely no sense what he was doing. So Alcaraz is up a break, Sinner is struggling physically, and instead of extending the rallies and making them more physical, Alcaraz starts doing serve and volley, starts doing low percentage drop shots, loses his serve, then loses his serve one more time, and ends up losing that set 6-3. And the way he lost it was from a strategic mistake that was incomprehensible at the time. But now we understand that Carlos was also struggling with cramps that went away quite fast, and the same with Sinner. Those cramps didn't persist, they also went away. And it's understandable that these guys were cramping because there was a lot on the line. This was a high pressure match, which also can explain some of the low quality play from both of these guys early in the match. I thought that Carlos Alcaraz played a lot better in the fourth set, and he played some of his best tennis in the fifth set. This is where the quality of the match went up significantly. A crucial point in the fourth set when Alcaraz was up 5-4 and it was 15-30 on Sinner serve. He missed an easy overhead, which was a mistake that I'm sure hurt him a lot because he ended up getting broken in that game and losing the fourth set 6-4. In the fifth set, Carlos was in some small difficulties on his service games, but he delivered some clutch serving. I do feel like Carlos is serving better. I made a video last week about the changes that Carlos has made on his serve. I recommend that you check that video out. But something else that was interesting to me in today's semifinal match, that when Carlos was struggling, it wasn't really his backhand that was breaking down, it was more his forehand. And I have seen this in some other matches as well. And in the past, it was often shot selection that was contributing to some of those forehand errors. But in today's match, it seemed like the feel was gone on his forehand. He was shanking some forehands and missing by quite a bit. So I think the primary reason for today's lack of feel, especially in the first set, we're talking about the Alcaraz drop shot and some of those wild forehand errors, were the nerves. The forehand did look a lot better in the fourth and fifth set. And generally, and this goes for players of all levels, and when you're tight and you have a two-handed backhand, that is a shot that's least likely to break down simply because you have two hands on the rackets. It's generally the forehand or the serve or the volleys, where if you're tight and nervous, it's quite possible that you lose feel on those shots. Now, some people were complaining about this being a poor quality semifinal, and I don't think so. This was a super entertaining match, and I might be different from you guys, but I don't always need quality to have an entertaining experience watching a tennis match. Now, let me tell you why. Of course, the best thing that can happen is two players playing on the top of their game in a tight match. But interestingly, when I was talking about the Sabalenka-Andreeva quarterfinal match, and I stated that this was a very entertaining match, and somebody in the comments wrote that this match was of such a bad quality that this person turned the match off after one set. See, to me, it's the storylines that are written in a match, the drama. And I find it super interesting that when you have an elite level player who caught a bad day, if they manage to figure out how to win an ugly match like that, that to me is a super impressive thing to watch. Maybe they start off playing really poorly, but they win the big points. I do think that today was an example of Carlos not playing at the top of his game, but in one of the most important matches of his career, winning the important points and figuring out how to beat Sinner, who's the #1 player in the world, one of the most unbelievable ball strikers that we've ever seen. And Carlos was able to figure out how to beat him. And I thought that was a super entertaining thing to watch. All right, let's talk about Ruud against Zverev. First of all, Ruud is one of the most underrated players on tour. The guy is a 3-time Grand Slam finalist, and he made another semifinal. He won Barcelona this year, was in a final of Monte Carlo. This guy is a phenomenal player on any surface, but especially on clay. So a lot of credit goes to Ruud. But I want to talk about Zverev at Grand Slams. See, Zverev was able to beat the big three at the most important tournaments in the world. Masters 1000, ATP World Tour Finals. However, when we're talking about slams, this is where Zverev struggled going deep. And I do think that the final that he lost to Dominic Thiem in 2020 hurt him mentally. There was some kind of a mental block regarding Grand Slams. I do think that Zverev was getting out of that mental block in 2022 when he played his best Grand Slam and played an incredible match against Rafa in the semifinals before rolling his ankle. So what happens this year, he catches Rafa in the first round and plays an unbelievable match, but then struggles. Honestly, he should have lost that match to Griekspoor. Griekspoor had it on his racket. Zverev had another tough match against Rune. so 2 consecutive 5-set matches. He did beat de Minaur comfortably, and in today's match, Zverev had a rough first set where he was missing a lot of first serves, but then he started getting more comfortable on the court and won the remaining 3 sets very comfortably. So the thing that's impressive about Zverev this year is his serve, and on the ATP Tour website there is a statistic which are a bunch of data points that are combined. They even consider second serves, and Zverev in 2024 is ranking as the 2nd highest quality server. And not only has the quality of the Zverev serve gone up, the speed is also insane. Zverev is one of the fastest servers on average in the world. I'm not 100% certain if he's either number 1 or 2 regarding average first serve speed on the ATP Tour in 2024. And I've talked many times about the Zverev two-handed backhand. It is one of the best in the history of tennis. I recommend that you watch my video on differences between a classic, a modern, and a next-gen two-handed backhand. See, in the final, we're gonna see a lot of backhand-to-backhand exchanges, and we're gonna see a modern two-handed backhand from Zverev with a more continuous timing versus a next-gen two-handed backhand from Alcaraz that has more of a rapid, sudden acceleration. But what impressed me the most in Zverev's first round were the cross-court two-handed backhands, because I've seen Zverev hit so many backhand down-the-line winners. This was something that was hurting Ruud in today's match as well. Zverev is really good at going down the line and changing directions, but against Rafa, Zverev hit some of the most insane backhand cross-court winners that I've ever seen. Not only was he able to angle the ball sharply off the court a la Daniel Collins, but he also did it with a tremendous amount of power. Zverev's forehand is also rock solid, and for somebody of his size, he moves exceptionally well. Now, in the head-to-head against Alcaraz, Zverev is up 5-4. However, the last time they played, Alcaraz beat him 3-1 in Indian Wells. The last time they played in a Grand Slam, which was at the 2024 Australian Open, Zverev won in 4 sets. So I do think that this is going to be a tough match for Carlos. Zverev has a chance to win this one. However, if Carlos plays like he did in the 4th and the 5th set against Sinner, he's going to come up victorious, because I do believe in clay court tennis. Even though Carlos doesn't see himself as a clay court specialist, he can certainly play like one. And what does it mean to be a clay court specialist? Well, first of all, it's the variety of play, utilizing drop shots, slices, a heavy amount of spin, also playing the ball at different heights, having the ability to open up the court, being unbelievably good at defending, making the other person hit extra balls, possessing a good kick serve, and also having the ability to transition to the net and put volleys away. Carlos has all those tools in his bag, and if he uses them, he is going to win his first French Open title on Sunday.